Welcome to Now That's Bass. I'm Pete Roythorne, and this is your weekly dose of bass insights. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to share your own insights and experiences in the comments. So, welcome back, or just welcome if this is your first time. My guest today is a hugely accomplished session bassist whose credits include the likes of Jethro Tull, Gary Moore, Archive, and even Take That. And that's probably just scratching the surface. He's also apparently played on the soundtrack for the Men from U.N.C.L.E. soundtrack. Well, clearly not the 60s original TV show, sadly. But anyway, Jonathan Noyce.
Good afternoon. Very nice to meet you, Pete.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much for coming on. It feels like being in the presence of greatness a little bit. I mean,
I don't know about that, but that's a very nice thing to say. Thank you very much.
But yeah, so I mean, we touch on. I mean, obviously, I know you predominantly through the Archive stuff. But yeah, no, just to talk a little bit about. So really, obviously, I think probably the thing that you would be best known for would be the Jethro Tull stuff and the Gary Moore thing. Was that? What else have you done?
I've done all sorts of things, very varied. My, I guess sort of Take That was the thing that the first. I mean, if you want to call it a break, if you like, I think that it's what you call a break, but it was a breakthrough because it was something that was. It was a very big act at the time. I played on Relight My Fire. I was working with a producer called Dave Lee, and it ended up being a really big hit. And that was sort of at the very beginning of my recording, kind of session recording life, if you like. So that was the first thing. Jethro Tull for a long time, which took up most of the 12 years that I was there. Obviously going more films. I've been involved in film music, Man from U.N.C.L.E., as you've mentioned, the Yesterday film, the Spider-Man cartoon series, tons of other things, Molly's Game, Gold, all sorts of stuff there. The Divine Comedy, I've made a couple of guest appearances with. Anna Calvi, Nadine Shah. Those are the things that I can sort of remember off the top of my head. So quite varied things. Occasionally not so much the jazz thing now, but I've touched on lots of things. I just try and keep moving, really, trying to adapt.
Yeah. Well, I think that's essential, really, isn't it? But kind of like let's turn the clock right back and say, so where did your whole, I suppose, love affair, if it is one, with the bass really start? How did you get going with it?
Well, I guess it's sort of if I arrived, I fell into it. I had tried. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I'd started out with the piano, and when I was young, as we all do, I fell in love with the drums. I became a drummer and a percussionist. I played the guitar, and it was around about the time that I was also playing the drums, and I kind of figured out that I really liked the bass lines, and I ended up picking out the bass drums with the bass lines with the Spanish guitar that I had, because I was learning classically, because that seemed to be there was really, when I was studying in the 80s, there wasn't, I guess, mid 80s, there were things, education, rock education, jazz education, that sort of thing started to appear. But my road to learning about the science, if you like, and the technique of music was through classical music. So that gave me the language. And so I kind of arrived at the bass, I guess, kind of when I was about 14 or 15, and predominantly was because of Level 42, who were becoming a really big act at the time. It was it was a good time for popular music, because there were lots of very, very good players that were popular. Obviously Gary Moore, we mentioned earlier, but Level 42 are a very fine bunch of musicians. People could play, and that culture, and obviously there's lots of kind of guitarist stuff going on as well. But that was cool. So I landed there, and that's where my journey began. At least a sort of kind of learning to play the bass was sort of along to Level 42 records.
It's interesting because I wouldn't have put you down as a slap merchant.
No. Well, no. I think that it's something that has become kind of cooler, but certainly, like going forward, it was. I think I was aware it was maybe a bit of a party piece, and that's not. A party piece is a kind of fun thing once in a while, but it's not something that you don't want to eat every day, So I had to learn to use my fingers properly. So I that's where the kind of the serious study came in. Being a drummer was really helpful playing slap bass. Mark King was a drummer.
Yeah.
So I instinctively knew what he was doing because it was very much related to drum technique, like sticking technique. So I totally I could hear what he was doing, and then I realised that it's a completely different technique from using your fingers, and also then again from using a plectrum, which is sort of they're all very different kind of things. The things you have to pay attention to within those kind of genres of styles, if you like. So yeah, I didn't use the slap. I very, very rarely use it now, even to be honest. I kind of went through a bit of a period of, and there are people like Mark King and Larry Graham, obviously, who is their thing.
Yeah.
So let's kind of leave it. Let's leave it there. I'd rather kind of carry on doing other things.
Yeah, no, it's funny because obviously we probably grew up not that far apart. I certainly, when I started, it was that kind of obsession with sounding like a rather overexcited typewriter, I think is the best way to put it. Which I think it was back in those days, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and Mark King is getting his dues. Level 42 are getting their dues. The whole again, which is really great because they are an amazing band. They were really, really big, and they're good people. I've met Mark King a few times. I know a few of them, and he was a hero of mine. So, and I think that also he's like a humble guy, Yeah, I kind of leave it to them. There was a period when I kind of did think that it was a little bit like belching in public, it was sort of something a little bit vulgar, but you can say that about anything that is done out of bad taste, if you like. So try and keep
it's interesting because I find now, and I'm just about to go back into sort of some high-end lessons just to kind of tidy my playing up a little bit. And my teacher was going, well, we can come into slap, and I'm thinking, God, I've just I genuinely feel like I've slapped myself out. It's kind of like I was so. It was so over the top, and that whole Mark King of the hammer-ons with you could just be. It was just like it was potentially a clacking mess, which is kind of But I think I've kind of come out the side, and along with you, I'm a bit like, I'm not quite sure I can go there these days, and all this double thumbing technique is like I'm a bit like no, I just, as you say, leave that to somebody else.
I think so. I had some lessons quite early on because I had, I was asked to play. I grew up in North Hertfordshire, and there was a local band that I found out that I played bass. So I must have been 14 or 15. I went to play, and the only thing that I could do was play slap bass, and it just it didn't fit. They wanted to be Sisters of Mercy or something, and it didn't work. And that was a harsh lesson. So I think the lesson is whatever's appropriate. Really, there are times when I'll do something. I tend to use it more like a sonic piece of punctuation because a lot of the time it just does stick out.
Mm.
So I'll tend to use it as a kind of little thing. I mean, there are people like Lewis Johnson as well, who definitely, of course, need to be mentioned, because I mean he had a very much more of a kind of a thumb thing that he
Mm.
did with the Brothers Johnson. You can hear him on some Quincy Jones productions and Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. He's on there. And that was a sort of somewhere between kind of more towards a kind of plectrum kind of a sound, if you like. But I mean,
Mm.
he really is, he's thumbing everything there,
Mm.
But I mean, everything, it just sort of comes down to taste and being appropriate, I think,
Mm.
always. And I've, part of the reason for being a bass player that I enjoy is standing at the back. And so,
Yeah.
and I'm just really happy to kind of blend into the background. So the more things I can do to be invisible, the better. I'm happy about that. And slapping is not
Mm.
one of those things that makes you invisible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know, because obviously, again, just to say, I know you through our mutual friend Smiley, the drummer, and he's
Mm.
one of the things that Smiley always says is about. He said, Noyce, he's like, he's just there, and then he'll do something, and you just go, oh, I'd sort of kind of forgotten you were there, because it just everything you do just blends in perfectly.
Mm.
There's
Yes.
nothing in there that's kind of like in your face or out of place. It's kind of
It's a supportive role. I'm there to
yeah.
support instrumentally, but I'm also there to support the music and do
Mm.
serve the music. That's it.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Music is.
so, so you've gone, 14-year-old sat in your bedroom slapping to Mark King. How did you, tell me about that journey from there to playing on a Take That record?
Well, I guess um, study had a lot to do with it. I mean, I was playing a lot of music. There came a point where I had to make some decisions about my education, and I was studying in Hitchin at Hitchin Boys
Mm.
School, and I decided to go and study music. There was a local North Herts College, it was a sixth form college, and they had a serious music course. So I was able to go there and do a double A level in music because my plan was to go on and then study further. So I ended up being conservatoire level. So I mean, but that
Mm.
period was really important because I was with friends, I was with people my own age,
Mm.
and we were all, so it was a mixture of disciplines. I was sort of on the sort of classical and the jazz tip, if you like. I was amongst musicians, trumpet players, cellists, singers,
Mm.
and everybody kind of had their own practice room. So I had a practice room, and I could clock what people were doing.
Mm.
So by listening to how people were improving, it was sort of via osmosis, really. I
Mm.
think the same for everybody. So that was where the application of harmony and scales and rhythm and all those things, and using a metronome and building up technique and good time and good tone. That's where all that. I mean, that period was very important.
Mm.
I realised that by being diligent, uh, learning the fretboard and making sure that my left hand or my fretted hand was working properly, and I was doing the correct thing with my
Mm.
plucking hand, if you like, that consistency of sound, good quality of sound was really important. So that was that was where things started to kind of take shape. I still didn't really know at that point quite what I wanted to do, but because I was studying classically, and my principal instrument was percussion, with I think with sort of piano and double bass and things. Um, I I was heading towards music college.
Mm.
I knew that the Royal Academy of Music was somewhere that was interested to me because I was starting up a jazz course. So
Mm.
I applied. I ended up being accepted on the classical course, and I immediately switched to the jazz and commercial music course, which was
Wow.
in its sort of early days there.
Mm.
And that's where things started to kind of. I was in a great place because I was amongst friends, people my own age and this is more focused, we're all there to kind of study jazz, but with our own flavors and bits and pieces. And that's where I started to learn about music and doing things in London at a serious level. So yeah, it was glorious because suddenly we were all together and the level was really, really high. And that was where, so being in London, I met friends, had a band, and playing in various places. I met people in clubs and such, and I ended up meeting a producer, Dave Lee, and he's quite a brilliant man. He was working. He used to work under the moniker Joe Negro, and
Yeah.
amongst others, he has an entity. As he's a very clever, brilliant, funny guy. He specializes in, well, I guess kind of disco is a very specific, Latin influenced things. But at the time it was garage music. So I ended up playing on his records, and at that time, Take That were doing things, and Dave did a couple of things for them, and I was there. So we Light My Fire, and I think everything changes. I think was the other thing we did. So that's suddenly kind of happened. I was still at college, and then all the lights went on.
Wow.
And that was very, very cool.
That was amazing. So you were still at college when you did the Take That stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Things were sort of halfway through I had a 4-year course, and things started to happen from the second year onwards,
Wow.
So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It was really exciting. It was a really great thing. And, but what's interesting about working in, well, kind of any field really, but working in music, if you have a hit, is irrespective of what it is, people respect that. And it wasn't too long after that. It was sort of a couple of years later that I joined Jethro Tull, and Ian mentioned that because it's his daughter. His daughter was, I don't know, she was probably 15, 16 at the time. So obviously he knew about that. But I got some props. I got some stripes.
Yeah.
And so that's how that started.
Yeah.
And then here we are.
I was going to say, so that's kind of, that was your big sort of door open, that big sort of moment. Did you have a point at which you went, oh, shit, I could do this. I can make a career out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, I've never kind of rested on my laurels. But I guess sort of that was the moment when it was like, okay, yeah. I mean, I think you're right, Pete, actually. Yeah, that was the moment I thought, okay, everything's cool. Yeah. But we can but I always felt that there was, I always do feel there's more to do. And it really wasn't until I joined Jethro Tull actually Jethro Tull was the moment when I was really lucky to have crossed paths with Martin Barr and Ian Anderson and everybody in the band, because that took me on a completely different path. Yeah. And it was a brilliant one, because it was one where I was working at a very, very high, I couldn't have worked at a higher level, in all honesty. And I was young. I was 23 when I joined, and I couldn't have been amongst a better group of people, very, very disciplined, feet on the ground. I was talking to somebody a few days ago about this, and about how it wasn't a starry affair at all. It was all about keeping your feet on the ground and keeping it real, because if your head is in the clouds, you can't see what's going on down below, and you do have to do that. And that's partly how they remained as important as they have been, And so I think, there were lots of other things that happened. There were lots of other things that were going on. I did a lot of session work, and the Take That thing was one of the things, sort of amongst those things. But there are other things I did around that as well, So, it was cool. It was a really good time.
You kind of, to me, you pull out a couple of interesting things there. One of which is this, not keeping your feet on the ground. And the other one is not resting on your laurels, is that sense that, probably I was self-employed in another area, so I worked in marketing, but so I was self-employed within that, and my philosophy within that was always you're only as good as your last job. You know, you can't.
That's very true.
So you
It is
can't.
very true.
A, you can't burn your bridges, and B, you have to maintain that thing that you were only as good as your last job.
Yeah, yeah, quite. I was thinking, yeah, absolutely. I think, you have to sort of, I mean, in time, um, you you understand, I've understood what my language is and what the language is,
Mm,
what I'm trying to do, how to apply what I do, and to trust my instincts. And as long as I'm happy, I guess the goal is for me to be happy with. Maybe happy is not the right word, but to be if I'm if I'm okay with something that I've done, then that
mm,
usually means that everybody else is.
mm,
And as long as that's the case, there are occasionally, situations that are that don't, that aren't comfortable,
mm,
but they most of the time have sort of gone my way.
mm.
But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Mm, So I would say, talking about that uncomfortable thing, so digging into that a little bit. So,
Mm.
where do you think you've learned throughout your career to date? Where do you think you've learnt the most valuable lessons that have kind of, I suppose, shaped you, moved you forward, formed your
Prob-
opinion of how to move, how to play, whatever? It's kind of that.
well, just with being with Jethro Tull, quite probably, because it was sort of confirmation. So going back to the thing of of sort of confirmation, that was confirmation that I was good enough,
Mm,
and I was good enough to be chosen to join them, and I was good enough to have been with them for that long.
mm,
And amongst men, grown men, I was
mm,
just a child really when I joined them. So I mean, that was the confirmation, and it was the confirmation that everything that you play has to be there for the correct reason. There's no
mm,
space for ego. There's no space for frivolity. It's a, it's a, yeah, because it just sounds. I mean, you can spot something that doesn't work. So it was really there that kind of, and it's still very much. Yeah, it colors my opinion about the way to make the
mm,
way to make music, the discipline, the shape, you know. So a lot of, I mean, but I mean, it was all there before, to be honest, because
mm,
my background being classical music,
mm.
yeah, was already there.
Mm, But it's just kind of it's reaffirming. Well, I mean, yeah, you can have something technically in theory, but then rolling that out into practice can be a very different thing.
Yeah, I guess yeah, very much so, and that's where kind of integrity comes in.
Mm,
Taste and integrity, which are, yeah, you can't really be taught. I mean, taste. I mean, who knows? Yeah, but yeah, that's sort of where that was all solidified,
mm, mm,
tattooed
mm.
upon me.
Have you ever have you ever been in a situation where you felt you've had kind of imposter syndrome? Have you ever felt that feeling of like, oh God, what am I doing here?
Yeah, yeah, it happens. It does happen. Yeah, it does
Mm,
happen. Um, yeah, so there is a bit of that comes in, and sometimes there's a bit of stage fright that comes in,
yeah.
and but yeah, but maybe kind of a bit also a bit more when I was younger. I definitely do suffer from a bit of nerves,
Mm,
which I think is a good thing. But yeah, but you know what? I've learned that I'm all right. I'm not
mm,
an imposter,
mm,
because but it does matter to me. I think, whether that's a kind of a sign of some form of integrity, if you like, if you're kind of questioning your reason to be there. I know that I've got the skill to be able
mm,
to do things,
mm,
because I've spent a long time doing it, and I grew up in music. My
Mm.
family musical.
Oh, okay.
Um, so music is my language. But yeah,
Mm.
it does come up. I mean, you
Mm.
can't. I guess you can't help it. But
Mm.
it's
Mm.
never stopped me from doing anything.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so how, so you've got, so you're in Jethro Tull for 12 years. Were you doing other stuff around that, or was that your kind of core focus for those 12 years?
Initially, when I started doing it, yes, because I was in London and I was a working musician. As time went on, I mean, it was a full-time job being in Jethro Tull. We
Mm.
were doing 100 shows a year, and there was recording and other bits and pieces. I had a family, and it enabled me to spend more time with them. It did enable to me to do other things. Um, I used to work a great deal at Martin Barr's studio. Martin was the the guitarist in Jethro Tull, and he had a
Mm.
studio, so I used to go and work down there at his place with various people, not only Martin. But it was it was pretty much kind of centered on Jethro Tull. Um, Towards the end, I met Gary Moore, and then there was, I mean, the Jethro Tull thing was slowing down for me, and
Mm.
there was some space for me to be doing other things.
Mm.
So I met Gary, and that kind of that worked quite nicely for a little while. But there was a little bit of a clash of interest there. it didn't, it didn't. I mean, it didn't entirely didn't cause too many problems,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was able to do other things. I worked with a band called Global Communication, and that was down
Mhm.
at Martin Barr's place, which was a very important electronic music reference because
Mm.
Global are Mark Pleshard and Tom Middleton. They made some seminal ambient music in the mid 90s.
Mm.
I have a great love of synthesizers of electronic music, and that was a perfect kind of synthesis into their area and vice
Mm.
versa.
Mm.
Out of those sessions, a band called the Bays was born.
Mm.
And if you look me up on Wikipedia, you'll see that I'm known as Bay Boy. And that's because
Nice.
that's a nod to the Bays.
Mm. Mm.
But that was something that was really important to me and has become a kind of big influence on me.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all sorts of stuff. But Tull took up a lot of my time. Yeah,
Mm.
in a
Mm.
nutshell.
Mm. 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 So it's kind of that sort of transition in terms of keeping your career going has it been a sort of, I suppose has it been a fairly organic process for you? Is it just kind of unfurled it? You haven't necessarily, oh, sorry, has it just kind of, unfurled before you, or have you had to really work in areas to kind of get that next job to push yourself forward?
I've certainly had to wait a couple of times. Coming out of Jethro Tull, um, uh, people, yeah, kind of people obviously kind of thought I was part of this entity, and which I
Mm.
was. And when it stopped in 2007, there was a period of time when I didn't know, I was kind of neither here or there. And funnily enough, sort of the Jethro Tull, even though Jethro Tull uh, is a great band, it didn't always go my way working with with other people, because they kind of thought that I'd be a sort of progressive rock guy and all that kind of stuff. That
Mm.
happened a few times, which I think is wrong, but that's just the way the world is.
Mm.
Um, so there was a period of time when I had to. It took me a bit of a while to, like a year or so, to re-establish myself, if you like.
Mm.
And in that time is when I got the call to go and join the Divine Comedy for a month on tour to cover Simon Little, who's been their bass
Mm.
player. They've got a pretty solid band, and the people in that
Mm.
world are friends of mine. And that was a really great thing to do because it was playing songs and playing compositions, which is something that I really, really love.
Mm.
And in a slightly different situation, if you like, you know.
Mm. Mm.
But yeah, so probably took me 2 or 3 years to get rolling again. But I knew that it was important that I do something that was a bit different, and it was important for me to do something which was maybe kind of closer to my own personal taste in music. I
Mm.
was right. I've always written music, and I've made electronic music. I started to write more, and those influences were kind of quite apparent in moving forward. Started to use the Moog uh,
Mm.
synthesizer playing live as well, which was sort of part of that. So yeah, it took me a little bit of a while, but and and those ideas have really have stayed with me. I decided to take things kind of back a step and look at like old vintage, you know, very particular. There's a very particular setup that I decided that I wanted
Mm.
to look at in terms of like sonically,
Mm.
which was something that was very traditional, but also kind of took me forward. And that was the using an old Precision,
Mm.
a Moog synthesizer, and an old
Mm.
Ampeg flipped up
Mm.
bass amp. And I thought that using those things, I could go forward and do something a bit
Mm.
different. And that's very much worked for me, because it worked for film a bit later on, and it worked
Okay.
for all the kind of other things that I do. So I had to kind of go back and study, but use some of the older influences that were prevalent in early Jethro Tull, so blues,
Mm.
um, and things like that, and take those ideas and develop them and move those forward
Mm.
at the same time as trying to find some like minds, if you like. But
Mm.
the Divine Comedy thing was really, meeting those people was really important for me, because uh, they, again, they work at a very high kind of musical level. I was working with interesting people like Nigel Godrich and people like that, and
Mm.
it also took me into the world of working in film music,
Mm.
which I still do. So that was a
Mm.
whole different area, and I mean, very disciplined, pretty stressful, and but I'm glad I've been able to do that as well, on top of the
Mm.
live work and the studio stuff that I've done.
Mm.
But
Mm.
as far as, I think I, I'm not a networker, um, but I have worked really hard at having a really solid musical outlook,
Mm.
and I believe that if you have to take care of the important elements. And the most important element is the music. And that means working at it and making sure that you understand what you do, and understanding the harmony and the melody and all those sorts of things, because
Mm.
they're simple ideas, but they forever grow. And the basis of bass, if you like, are simple ideas. So understanding those things, so taking care of those things, if you like, yeah.
Mm.
But
Mm.
having respect for the music and not being flippant with it,
Mm.
because it is art.
Mm. No,
It's a lot of
exactly.
fun.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly, and it is work as well. But you kind of
Mm.
you touched on something there, which was when when you were talking about sort of basically changing your gear. So you're talking taking the P bass and the
Yeah,
flip top and stuff. Is
yeah.
how how important generally is gear? I mean, I like to ask this because I think everybody has a slightly different take on it. I mean, obviously, gear has been your equipment has been fundamental, it sounds, in a way, in terms of shifting you from almost being pigeonholed as Mr. Progressive Rock
Mm.
into something else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was just trying to figure out why people use what they use, and looking
Mm.
at other people. Why do certain kinds of players, use take it? Why do they get a jazz bass and stick a preamp in it? And why do they do this and why do they do that? And what is it that works for me, uh, on an emotional level, but also on a technical level? And I think you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. Really, it depends what you do, what you want. I don't think the gear is the be all and the end all. the music is the be all and the end all.
Mm,
So you have to take care of that, and then you apply your kind of technical ideas to that. But personally, um, it's important to have a decent instrument that is set up correctly, that's in tune, technically is fine, and your cables are all good, and
mm,
you've got a tuner.
mm,
And then what happens, if you want to start using pedals and stuff, just make sure that you're making a good noise and an appropriate noise when you're using them. My favorite bass guitar is my old Yamaha BB 1100 S,
I
which was my
remember.
first
Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
first
yeah.
proper bass.
Mm,
And I've got two of them now. My original is somewhere else. In my over in Italy, we
mm,
split our time between here and there.
mm,
Um, but I have another one, and which I've had refretted, and I'm using it all the time. So
mm,
having gone through this sort of
mm,
sound is, obviously I'm a great lover of synthesis and production and stuff. I've spent a lot of time with sound and with overdrives and distortions and signal chains and various bits and pieces, and the ways that
mm,
my old Fender Precision sounds amazing most of the time, and if I add this distortion to it and I play a plectrum or not use a plectrum, it sounds amazing. But I come back to the BB 1100 using the electronic setup that I've been using with my old Precision, and suddenly it's like this has got a completely different focus. So that's a choice that I've made. I'm able to use that in a situation where I'm allowed to be myself, which I'm very fortunate that I am
mm,
most of the time allowed to be myself. If you're working in a working environment, it does help to have an instrument which is kind of more suitable to that. So, Fender Jazz is a very, very good instrument for that. Precision is also good for that.
mm,
Um, but yeah, you've got to have an instrument that is 100% reliable
mm,
and is not going to, it's not going to do the dirty on you. So military grade is the only way. Is this the way that is
combat,
the way that
combat ready.
That's right,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I did take a few risks and I got away
yeah,
with it a long, long
yeah,
time ago,
yeah,
but I don't do that any longer.
yeah, yeah. So just to kind of, I suppose, wrap it up. Really, I could rabbit on for hours, but I'm thinking probably don't want to bore people to tears too much. If is there anything, if you were stood next to your younger self now, is there anything that you would say to your younger self about how to progress in your career? Is there anything, I wouldn't say regret or even do differently? It's like, is there any advice that you would have given your younger self?
Well, I think when I was younger, I was actually bold and everything, everything was sort of looking back at my younger self. I have all the components that I had
Mm,
then. The
mm,
worry came later. So I would say to the person that was a little bit, you know, I guess sort of in my late 20s, don't worry,
mm,
just carry on. Um, Trust your instinct and just keep going because I do know what I'm doing,
mm,
but yeah, but just don't worry
mm, mm.
and
Excellent.
make sure you've got a decent set of bass strings as well.
Really? I thought I just, well, that's a good point, actually. How often do you change your bass strings? Are you a sort of
Uh,
never change your bass strings, or are you sort of,
well, it depends, really. It sort of depends. There are some instruments that I've got which I very rarely change the strings on because they just sound good and I leave them.
uh,
And the strings that I use are very, very good.
uh,
Anyhow, I
uh,
don't like bright tones. I
uh,
don't like a bass to sound like a piano. But I like each bass to sound the way that it does. So some basses have round wounds. Mostly it's half wounds actually, and then I've got
okay.
the black tape wounds, which are a
Yeah.
bit bassier and boomier than regular flat wounds.
Mm,
But if I'm doing, it really depends though. If I'm on tour, sometimes you just need a little bit of bite. And
mm,
with my Yamaha, I've been changing maybe kind of every 4 or 5 shows.
uh,
There are some very good strings that don't need changing so often.
mm,
The
mm,
Dario makes some very nice XL things, which I have
mm,
on some basses, and they're very good because they're very sharp. And
mm,
the answer is every 4 or 5 shows
mm.
for my working instruments.
Cool. Jonathan, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Pete.
Hopefully I'll cross paths at one of your gigs somewhere.
It certainly will. Can I tell you what my favourite bass song is?
Go on then.
America by Simon and Garfunkel.
Really?
Yes. Joe
Why?
Osborne. Joe Osborne.
Why? Joe Osborne.
Because it's
Okay.
Joe Osborne. And
Yeah.
he's just he's totally what I'm talking about when somebody that sits in the back. But he knows how to play a song, and he knows how to be present in a piece of music without blowing the doors off it. So
well, there you go. I will go up. I'll at the moment we finish this, I will go and listen to that. So
open your heart and open your mind.
Always. Great stuff. Nice one. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Pete.